Look at the fare you're being shown. Same flight, same departure time, same destination. One ticket is cheaper, and the airline isn't hiding why. Before you buy it, it tells you exactly what you're giving up. Your seat choice, your flexibility, your boarding position, sometimes your upgrade or loyalty benefits. That's strange, because normally when a company wants you to buy something, it tells you why the product is better. Here, the airline is doing almost the opposite. And this isn't some accidental corner of the airline business. Airlines are expected to generate around $145 billion this year from ancillary and other revenue, inside a global industry expected to cross $1 trillion. So why build a cheaper ticket and then work this hard to show you its limitations? American Airlines' president said it plainly to investors, on the record, basic economy is not a price cut. He said it exists to anchor the airline's pricing structure, to give every customer, from the most price-sensitive to the most premium, something to choose between. And the strategy behind it isn't a secret either. Every major U.S. carrier has followed the same logic since ultra-low-cost airlines like Spirit forced a rock-bottom headline fare into the market. Match the low price, but change what comes with it. If basic economy isn't simply a price cut, and its restrictions are displayed deliberately, what exactly is this ticket supposed to do? There is an obvious answer. Airlines remove things, then charge you to put them back. Part of that is true. Bags cost money to handle. Flexibility has real economic value. Different levels of service create different costs, but that doesn't explain the whole product. Look carefully at what disappears. The ability to select a seat, your boarding position, upgrade eligibility, loyalty treatment, the right to change your mind. Why these things? Why make their absence so visible? And why would an airline create a cheaper product if it doesn't necessarily want every passenger to choose it? Go back to when this started. Ultra-low-cost carriers were putting much lower headline fares into the market. Legacy airlines needed an answer that could compete on price without losing everything else. The logic seems obvious. If your competitor shows a much cheaper ticket, show one too. Except that creates another problem. A legacy airline already has thousands of passengers willing to pay its existing economy fare. Give them essentially the same proposition for less, and you've solved the competitor problem by creating a problem inside your own business. Because the cheap fare doesn't know who you intended it for. Anyone can buy it. The airline needs a cheap ticket. It cannot afford a cheap ticket that everyone wants. And that's the decision. When a cheaper competitor attacks from below, you can surrender to the price pressure. Lower the price. Give away more. Follow the market downward. Except that some of your existing customers will learn they never needed to pay you as much as they were paying before. Or you can try something much harder. Build an offer capable of fighting below without destroying the reasons customers were still paying more above. Compete downward without collapsing downward. But how do you actually build that? Where do you draw the line? And how do you know you've left enough value below to win without leaving so much that your own best customers follow it down? I've sat in a room dealing with essentially that problem. Not inside an airline, inside a detergent business. Early in my career, one of the brands I worked around was leading its category. But underneath that leadership, something was changing. Large retailers were giving more shelf space to private labels. Cheaper Tier 2 competitors were becoming more credible. At first, the numbers weren't dramatic enough to force a response. For 3 or 4 quarters, you could explain them away. Then share moved enough that you couldn't. The obvious response was to build something new for the lower-priced customer. A separate budget proposition, distanced from the flagship. That wasn't the route taken. The lower-priced proposition stayed connected to the same brand. And now the uncomfortable question became much more serious. What happens if our own premium customer finds it? The competitor wasn't the only thing that could take share from the premium product. Our own cheaper product could do it too. That was the argument inside the room. The lower-priced proposition had to be credible enough that someone considering private label had a reason to choose us. But it could not simply become the premium proposition at a lower price. There had to remain a difference the consumer could actually experience. In this case, that difference sat in one of the most visible performance signals in detergent, stain removal. The cheaper proposition was deliberately separated on performance, not made useless, not pushed to the floor. It still had to compete. But it wasn't designed by asking how good can we possibly make this product. The harder question was, how good can this product become before it starts doing the wrong job inside our own portfolio? That decision wasn't obvious. There was real resistance. Because the biggest risk wasn't simply what if private label keeps growing. It was, what if the people already paying us more discover that this is good enough? The argument that eventually made the risk acceptable was about where the growth was expected to come from. This was already a mature category. The belief was that the lower tier would disproportionately capture consumers already shopping cheaper alternatives, people moving sideways into our portfolio, rather than large numbers of existing premium consumers moving downward inside it. That distinction mattered, because the company wasn't really making one product decision. It was making a portfolio bet. Now go back to the airplane. The analogy isn't perfect. Airline inventory expires the moment the aircraft leaves. Prices change constantly, and the passenger in basic economy may be sitting in essentially the same physical seat as the passenger who paid more. But that's what makes the airline version so interesting. The airline doesn't necessarily need to make the seat worse. It can change the rights around the seat choice, flexibility, boarding priority, upgrade eligibility, loyalty treatment. The underlying transportation remains remarkably similar. The commercial product does not, and suddenly those warnings on the booking page look different. They're not merely a list of things the airline forgot to include. They're the fence. Put a sufficiently low fare at the bottom, and you can compete for the passenger whose first priority is price. Put meaningful restrictions around it, and another passenger looks at the exact same offer and says, "No, I want to choose where I sit. I need to be able to change this trip. I care about my status. I want the flexibility." That passenger moves upward. The airline hasn't asked either passenger how much they're willing to pay. It has built two propositions and let the passengers reveal it themselves. That's why the restriction can have value even when removing it saves relatively little physical cost. Its job isn't only to make basic cheaper. Its job can also be to preserve a reason to buy what sits above it. This is where the story becomes more interesting than airlines discovered a clever pricing trick, because the fence can be wrong. Make the lower tier too generous, and customers who would have paid more can trade down. Make it too punitive, and the price-sensitive customer doesn't necessarily upgrade. They can simply leave. That's the same tension sitting inside the detergent decision. The goal isn't maximum degradation. It isn't maximum generosity either. It's calibration. Enough value to compete below. Enough separation to protect above. And the line can move as competitors, customers, and economics change. Basic economy isn't explained by one trick. There are several systems sitting on top of each other. Revenue management decides how much low-priced inventory the airline wants to sell in the first place. Competitive pressure creates the need for a low visible entry fare. Real operating economics makes some benefits genuinely more expensive to provide, and the fare fence helps different customers sort themselves across the ladder. The important part isn't that every restriction exists for exactly the same reason. It doesn't. The important part is that the product as a whole has a commercial job. And that job only makes sense when you stop looking at basic economy by itself. There are two ways people usually react to being offered the stripped-down version of something. One says, "This is a scam, they're punishing me for paying less." The other says, "It's fine, cheaper just means less, don't think about it." They sound like opposites. They're the same mistake. Both let you skip the only question that actually matters. What am I giving up here? And is it something I genuinely never notice, or something I already valued? That's the personal version of the fork this room sat inside, because at the business altitude, it's the identical decision. When a cheaper competitor attacks from below, a company can surrender to the pressure. Let the whole portfolio collapse toward the cheapest offer and quietly teach every customer to expect less. Or it can overcome the pressure, decide what must remain untouched, decide what can move, and hold a deliberate gap between the two. Not every company can do it. Not every fence works. Sometimes customers reject the attempt outright. But once you understand the decision, a lot of cheap products start looking very different. And so does the next time you're the one being offered one. So the next time a company launches a cheaper version of something you already buy, don't only ask what did they remove to make this cheaper. Ask something else. Which differences had to remain so the product above it could continue to exist at its current price? Companies don't always optimize every product independently. Sometimes they're optimizing the distance between them. The unit of analysis isn't the cheap ticket or the premium ticket. It's the portfolio and the gap deliberately held open inside it. Now look at that booking screen one more time. Same flight, 2 fares, 1 aircraft. What looked like a cheap ticket beside an expensive one is actually 2 products doing 2 different commercial jobs. Sometimes the most revealing part of a product isn't what the company added. It's what it deliberately left out. If this is the kind of thing you want decoded, this is what the influence room does.